8 years ago, my cousin Joe invited me to his bachelor party. I didn't want to go. It was one of those awkward situations where you're surrounded by a bunch of people you don't really vibe with. I spent the entire night nursing a beer and waiting for the chaos to end. As the night dragged on, Joe's best man decided to spice things up by bringing in 2 strippers. While the others hooted and hollered, I stayed glued to my beer, avoiding eye contact with the so-called entertainment. It wasn't my scene, and I felt relieved when the night finally ended. Fast forward a week. I was at the gym when a pretty woman approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She made small talk and eventually revealed that she was one of the strippers from Joe's bachelor party. I was floored. Her name, or rather, her stage name, was Audrey. She looked completely different out of her work getup, more like the kind of person I'd want to get to know. One thing led to another, and I ended up asking her out. Audrey had only been stripping for a few months, and as we got closer, she decided to quit entirely. She wasn't ashamed of her past, but she didn't enjoy the job and knew I was uncomfortable with it. I respected her decision but didn't push her into it. It was all her. We kept her past between us. Even Joe, who could have made things awkward, kept quiet because I asked him to. Audrey moved on with her life, and so did I. We got married, built a family, and now have 2 incredible kids, a 5-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. Life was good, until recently. Joe, who had been awkwardly quiet around Audrey for years, started acting differently after his divorce. He began complimenting her looks every time he saw her, which made both of us uncomfortable. At a family barbecue, he crossed the line when he made a crude comment about how having kids hadn't ruined her figure. I saw red. I confronted him in front of everyone, my fists itching for a fight, but I knew better than to cause a scene in front of the family and kids. Joe, slurring his words, blamed the alcohol and apologized. But I made it clear, do not talk to my wife again. That should have been the end of it, but Joe wasn't done. A few days later, Audrey received a love letter from him. A full-blown, delusional confession asking her to leave me and start a new life with him. She didn't entertain it. She sent a short, polite email back. No, thank you, Audrey's handled this with grace, but I can see the weight she's carrying. She's terrified Joe will reveal her past to the family. She's not ashamed of who she was, but she doesn't want to deal with the judgment. Worse, she fears our kids might one day find out if it becomes a family-wide scandal. I've assured her that I'm okay with her past coming out if it means shutting Joe down. Her past doesn't define her, and it certainly doesn't change how I or anyone should see her. But she's adamant she doesn't want the family to know. And I respect her wishes. The problem is, I'm stuck. Joe hasn't done anything that warrants legal action, and Audrey doesn't feel physically threatened. She describes his behavior as juvenile more than anything. Still, I've told her we need to keep an eye on him. The hardest part is maintaining the balance. I love my extended family, and I want Audrey to feel comfortable around them. But with Joe around, that's nearly impossible. I want to protect my wife's peace, but I also want to avoid a family fallout. For now, I'm keeping things as civil as I can. I've made it clear to Joe that he's crossed a line, and I'm monitoring his behavior closely. Audrey and I are trying to shield our kids from this mess, but it's a tightrope walk. What Joe doesn't realize is that I'm done playing nice. If he keeps pushing, the gloves are coming off. My priority is my wife and kids, and I won't let anyone, even family, jeopardize their peace. Yesterday, my wife Audrey and I sat down with my parents to show them the love letter Joe had sent her. The one where he had the audacity to suggest she leave me to start a life with him. It wasn't an easy decision to involve them, but it felt like the right step. We were tired of dealing with Joe's behavior alone, hoping my parents might help us navigate the situation. What followed, though, was far more than we expected. As the conversation unfolded, my parents revealed things they had been keeping from me. Joe, it turned out, had a history of this behavior. He had sent similar love letters to another cousin's wife and, shockingly, to his uncle's wife. His uncle, by the way, is only 5 years older than him. In both instances, the women rejected him outright, and Joe moved on as if nothing had happened, leaving their marriages to deal with the mess he created. Strangely, both couples stayed together. My parents speculated it had to do with the deeply religious values in those families. Where divorce is seen as an absolute last resort, Joe's own marriage hadn't been so fortunate. His divorce was the direct result of his inability to stay faithful. Infidelity after infidelity had finally driven his wife to leave him. When Joe was caught pursuing the cousin's wife, he turned to the older family members, the ones I sarcastically call the old guard, and claimed he needed help. He confessed, apologized, and asked for forgiveness. They gave it to him, of course, because that's what the old guard does. They even set some so-called rules to help him stay in line, but those rules were clearly meaningless. And then there was the bombshell. My parents already knew about Audrey's past as a stripper. Joe had told his mom, who in turn told my mom, who passed the information along to my dad. At first, I was furious that this had been shared without our consent. But then, something unexpected happened. When Audrey broke down in tears, afraid of their judgment, my parents embraced her. They told her they didn't care about her past, only about the love and happiness we had built as a family. For the first time in days, I saw Audrey relax, even if just a little, feeling reassured. We left my parents' house that evening, hopeful they would address Joe's behavior with the rest of the family. But the fallout came quicker than we anticipated. Joe, realizing he was backed into a corner, decided to escalate. He told the old guard that Audrey had made the first move on him. He even claimed they'd slept together one random Tuesday while I was at work. The lie was ridiculous. I've been working from home for the past month. Audrey and I have been together almost constantly, and the rare times we're apart are brief, maybe an hour at most while she runs errands. Joe's story wasn't just false, it was absurd, but absurdity didn't stop the damage. Joe also decided to tell everyone in the extended family about Audrey's past, spinning it into a narrative that painted her as the reason for his relapse. Messages from family members started pouring in, many of them denouncing us. The worst came from Lisa's parents. Lisa is a younger cousin who's practically like a little sister to me. Her parents declared that she wasn't allowed to visit us anymore, even though she'd been a regular fixture in our home. Lisa herself texted me privately, saying she didn't believe Joe's lies but had to follow her parents' rules. Audrey was devastated. My worst nightmare came true, she kept saying, over and over. She had always feared her past being weaponized against her, and now that fear was playing out in real time. What crushed her even more was the thought of our kids one day learning about all this ugliness. I've been doing everything I can to support her, holding her close, reassuring her, reminding her that none of this defines her. Our kids, in their innocence, have been a source of light, bringing smiles to her face even in the darkest moments. Despite everything, we still believe going to my parents was the right decision. They've stood by us through this chaos, pushing back against Joe's lies wherever they can. Some of the younger family members, particularly those living independently, have also supported us. The rest of the family? I've written them off. My parents are trying to explain the truth to anyone willing to listen. But I'm not holding my breath for a full reconciliation. Lisa's private message gives me hope, though. She's not fooled by Joe. And I'm determined to maintain a connection with her in the future, no matter what. As for Joe, I'm done with him. His lies, his behavior, his delusions, they're his problems, not mine. Audrey and I are focusing on what truly matters, our kids, our happiness, and rebuilding the peace Joe tried to shatter. We've faced challenges before, and we'll get through this one too. Together, we'll come out stronger. Second story. For nearly 4 years, I thought my girlfriend and I were solid. Sure, the past year wasn't perfect, our life had dwindled, and I often felt like I was the only one initiating intimacy. It seemed like had become more of a chore for her, something she'd put off until the end of the night, if at all. I tried everything to reignite the spark, spontaneous dates, thoughtful gestures, but nothing worked. It started to weigh on me. This past April, things took a darker turn. I sensed something was off, a nagging feeling that she wasn't being honest about who she was spending time with. Normally, I'd never go through her phone. I've always believed in respecting my partner's privacy. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. For the first time in our relationship, I looked through her phone. What I found shook me. She had been texting a coworker, a 37-year-old divorced man with a daughter. Their texts weren't constant, sometimes going weeks without a word, but every now and then, one of them would send a casual hey or he'd ask when they could meet again. What hurt most was seeing the early messages from February. She wished him a happy birthday and even offered to give him his birthday present after work. One text stood out. When he asked to meet, she replied, "Not today, Poppy, I didn't drive myself to work." I had driven her that day. When I confronted her, she broke down, admitting she had felt excited by the attention even though she knew it was wrong. She claimed they never physically touched or met outside of work and that it was just texting. She said she felt guilty and stopped it before it went further. She cried endlessly, and as hurt as I was, I decided to give us another chance. We spent the summer trying to rebuild trust. At first, things seemed to improve. We had long conversations about transparency, honesty, and the importance of being open with each other no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. I wanted to believe her. But over time, small inconsistencies in her stories started to add up. First, I found a long list of contacts on her phone, men with local area codes that didn't make sense. We'd only lived in this area for 2 years, and I knew almost no one outside of work. When I asked, she said they were from old dating apps she'd used before we started dating and that she didn't even remember who they were. I let it go. Then I noticed her Instagram was full of new male followers, men I'd never heard of. None of them were from her hometown or school. When I asked, she said she didn't know them and promised to unfollow them. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, but then, a few weeks ago, I discovered something I couldn't ignore. Her app history showed she had downloaded Bumble on June 5, 2023. When I confronted her, I expected honesty, especially given her history with the coworker. Instead, she denied it repeatedly. She even accused me of downloading the app myself to check on her. I didn't push too hard, telling myself I could trust her, but the doubt lingered. Today, the weight of everything came crashing down on me. I realized there was no logical reason for me to have downloaded Bumble. If she was lying about that, what else might she be hiding? I feel like I'm losing my grip on reality. Am I crazy for doubting her? Or is she gaslighting me into questioning what I know to be true? I've given her so many chances, but every time I uncover something new, it feels like another crack in the foundation of our relationship. I don't know if I can keep going like this. Part of me wants to believe her, but the other part knows that trust isn't built on endless denials and half-truths. I just don't know what to do anymore. After months of questioning everything, I finally confronted my girlfriend about the Bumble account I discovered she'd made while we were still dating. What happened next was surreal. She didn't admit to the Bumble account, not even during the confrontation, but instead confessed to something far worse. She admitted to performing oral sex on the same guy she had been texting for months. It happened in the parking lot of the grocery store where she worked. In a strange, bittersweet way, her confession felt like a relief. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't feel like I was losing my mind. For half a year, she had sworn up and down that it was just texting and that nothing physical had happened. She would gaslight me constantly, calling me crazy and saying it hurt her that I couldn't believe her. I started to believe her lies, even though deep down, something didn't sit right. Her confession validated everything I had been feeling all along. But it also shattered me. She had been living a double life. Coming home every night for over a year, acting like everything was fine, all while keeping such a huge betrayal hidden. Even as she confessed, she tried to manipulate the narrative. She claimed she was forced into the act, but I knew better. After months of observing her reactions, learning her patterns, and picking up on how she lies, it was clear she wasn't telling the full story. And honestly, it didn't even matter anymore. I realized then and there that I was done. The lies, the betrayal, the gaslighting, it was all too much. I told her I couldn't do this anymore, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. Leaving her won't be easy. I have no savings and will need to move back in with my parents to get back on my feet. But I know this is the right decision. My focus now is on myself, hitting the gym, saving money, and meeting new people who will value honesty and trust as much as I do. This journey won't be quick or painless, but I'm ready to start fresh. To everyone who encouraged me to trust my instincts and supported me through this, thank you. I was blind for far too long, but now I see everything clearly. Third story. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, yet here I am, frustrated and baffled. Even my own family seems to think I'm the bad one here. So, I just need to vent and get this off my chest. No advice, no you should say this or here's what I would do. I just need to say it as it is. More than 17 years ago, my ex-husband cheated on me. He left me for another woman, someone who knew about me but clearly didn't care. At the time, our only daughter was just a baby. I moved on because, frankly, I'm not about to fight for a man who makes impulsive, immature decisions without a second thought for the consequences. He married her, and I focused on building a healthy life for myself and my daughter. Co-parenting was my only priority. He never apologized or showed any remorse. In fact, he once told me that our marriage was a mistake and that she was the love of his life. That was all I needed to hear to confirm he was a total jerk. I realized I deserved better and never looked back. Fast forward to now, and guess what? He's cheated on her. And for some reason, this woman, who has always been distant and cold to me, is suddenly desperate to talk to me about it. I found out about his infidelity through my daughter, who wasn't particularly bothered by it. I didn't think much of it either. My main concern was whether he could still have our daughter over on weekends as usual. But now, his wife keeps messaging me, explaining what happened as if I asked for details. I didn't. In the past, I only ever spoke to her if my ex wasn't responding about something related to our daughter. Now, she sends me long messages and voice notes about how she's feeling. It's clear she needs to vent, but why me? I try to reply with short, dry responses, hoping she'll get the hint. She doesn't. She keeps sending me emotional essays and audios about her heartbreak. And in one of her messages, she even said, "You know how I feel now." Really? Do I? Because 17 years ago, it was completely different. Let's be real, there's no comparison. Back then, I had just given birth when my husband admitted he had been cheating on me for months. He told me I was boring in bed and didn't value him. That's a world apart from someone marrying a man they knew was a cheater and then acting shocked when he does it again. I've tried to ignore her as much as possible, but when I talk about this with friends or family, they act like I'm the villain. She must feel so lonely, they say. She wasn't to blame for being the other woman. Or my personal favorite, you should be more empathetic, everyone needs someone to talk to. Look, I get it. She's not responsible for his behavior, and yes, he's the real problem. But let's not forget that she willingly married a man she was sneaking around with while he was married to me. Why should I be her shoulder to cry on when she never did anything to warn me back then? If the roles were reversed, I would have had the decency to say, hey, your husband is cheating on you with me, and I'm sorry. Instead, she stayed quiet, and now I'm supposed to be her therapist? I don't think so. Being cheated on isn't my entire identity, and I have no desire to spend my time rehashing it with her. She and my ex both knew what they were getting into. I don't owe her my empathy or my time. Yes, I could block her, but I can't. She still lives with my ex, and I need her contact info in case of an emergency involving my daughter. So, I'll continue ignoring her and keeping things as neutral as possible. To everyone calling me a bad feminist or telling me to do the right thing, I disagree. Feminism doesn't mean forcing myself to be someone's emotional crutch when I don't feel comfortable or willing. I'm done letting other people dictate how I should feel or act in a situation that's already behind me. If that makes me the bad guy in this story, so be it. I'm at peace with my choice. Life has a funny way of dragging you into situations you thought you left behind years ago. For me, it all came full circle when my ex-husband's wife, who was once his mistress, started bombarding me with messages. She wanted to talk, vent, and seemingly bond over the fact that he cheated on her. The irony was so thick I could practically choke on it. Let's rewind a bit. My ex-husband left me over 17 years ago for this woman. At the time, our daughter was just a baby. I had no choice but to move on because he made it clear that he had found the love of his life. I wasn't about to fight for a man who had the emotional maturity of a teenager. She married him knowing full well how he treated me, but hey, I guess she thought she could change him. For years, we maintained a civil co-parenting relationship. His wife and I kept our distance, only speaking if absolutely necessary. Now, suddenly, she wants to play victim because he cheated on her too. My first reaction was, what did you expect? She started sending me endless messages and audios about her heartbreak. At first, I tried to be polite, replying in short, neutral sentences, hoping she'd get the hint. She didn't. She even had the audacity to tell me, you know how I feel now. No, I don't. It's not the same. When he cheated on me, I had just given birth to his child. He told me I was boring and didn't value him. She, on the other hand, knew exactly what kind of man he was and still chose to marry him. Her heartbreak is self-inflicted. Even my own family tried to guilt me into comforting her. My mother, who had been the other woman in a long-term affair during my teenage years, tried to manipulate me into empathizing with her. No one chooses who they fall in love with, she'd say, projecting her own guilt onto the situation. My feminist friends were no better, insisting that judging the wife was misogynistic and that I should show solidarity. Here's the thing, I don't buy that logic in this case. Yes, the man is the primary villain, but women can also make cruel, selfish choices. My ex's wife wasn't manipulated. She willingly participated in hurting another woman. The breaking point came on a particularly bad day. I was already stressed with work, and her messages pushed me over the edge. I exploded, sending her a 5-minute audio telling her everything I'd been holding back for years. I told her that we are not the same. I am not her friend, and I have no interest in being her therapist. I reminded her that she knew exactly what she was getting into when she married a man who had cheated on his wife and the mother of his child. I told her she was delusional if she thought she was different or could change him. It was cathartic, but it didn't end there. We argued for a while, which only drained me more. Eventually, I realized this wasn't just affecting me, it was jeopardizing the co-parenting arrangement with my ex. I forwarded one of her audios to him and told him to handle his wife. I suggested she find a therapist because I wasn't going to be her sounding board anymore. He apologized, though not convincingly, and said they were working on their marriage. Apparently, they're attending some online conferences about overcoming infidelity. Good for them, I guess. Finally, he agreed to talk to her, and for the past 3 days, I haven't heard a peep from her except for one message about my daughter sleeping over. At this point, I don't care if their marriage thrives or falls apart. I don't care if she's happy pretending to forgive him. I just want to live my life in peace without being dragged into their soap opera. They're both in their 40s but act like they're stuck in high school. I've moved on, and I refuse to let their mess pull me back into the drama I left behind years ago. Fourth story. I recently found out that my husband 42 is cheating on me with our married best friend, 32F. She is the godmother to our 4 children. They don't know that I know, but I caught them making out at the end of our driveway when he was seeing her off after dinner with our family. We live on a small acreage and the driveway is a long way off from the main house. She had forgotten some crockery at the house and I decided to walk it over, because for some reason the two of them always took a while to say goodbye. Now I know why. That's when I saw them lit by her car's headlights, making out in the front seat with our best friend straddling my husband. In shock, I didn't know whether to throw her Pyrex at the car or just walk away. I decided the latter, and was too shocked to cry or be angry. When my husband got back, I had to pretend like everything was normal. I know that it's stupid, but I couldn't sleep that night and decided to go through his phone. She was obviously under a pseudonym, but I found a handful of their messages dating 2 or 3 years. Her husband doesn't know. He's currently posted overseas as a diplomat. I'm sick with rage and betrayal. I'm lost and have no idea what steps to take next. I don't live in the US, but in Australia. Technically, I can't file for divorce immediately, as you need to be separated for 1 year and 1 day to file officially. My now ex-best friend just recently returned to the country. Her father has cancer, after being posted with her husband overseas. The dinner was to welcome her home, and what a welcome. There's some comments here about the headlights illuminating them. Sorry, I meant overhead lights. As to what I'm going to do now, a part of me just wants to confront my husband, see what lame excuse he has. But I need to get away from him. This level of betrayal physically hurts. I can't help but think of all the times we spent together over the years and for how long our families were fooled. My mind is going crazy. When she was single and he would rescue her from some bad date, or the times they were alone in my house, when the kids and I were out. How irrationally angry he was when he found out she had a boyfriend, then chose to marry him. Thinking back on it, the two of them disappeared at her wedding. When I asked him where he was, he said he needed to reassure her that she had done the right thing. I feel so sick thinking of these things. As of tomorrow, my husband is out of town. I've tried really hard to act normal around my now ex-best friend, but it's proving difficult and I feel sick. I have been telling both of them that I've caught some terrible bug and just not feeling myself. While my husband is out of town for the next few days, my sister-in-law, who is the only other person who knows, my brother's wife, will help me pack important documents and store them somewhere my husband doesn't know about. I've organized for my kids to stay with them for a week while I sort my shit out. I've spoken to a family lawyer and they have told me that the best way to start the separation procedure is to no longer be living under the same roof. I'm fortunate in that most of our assets are also in my name, and the land our house is on was gifted to us by my parents. I'm planning to kick him out after his trip. But before that, I want to catch them both in the act again. Have some hard proof, send it to the ex-friend's husband and get the ball rolling for moving on with my life. My husband came home 2 nights ago from his trip. While he was gone, I had organized a lot of the important documents, e.g., financial, birth certificates, passports, anything that he could potentially use to try and get more than what he deserves. They are now safely stored and my kids have been staying with their aunt and uncle for the past few days. I had packed all my husband's things and he has been really good at keeping his tracks clean because there was no evidence of his affair within his stuff. I placed all his belongings in the garage ready for the confrontation with him. I was super nervous because I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision. Once he came home and I remembered seeing him kissing our best friend, I remembered the deep hurt they had caused. I was in our kitchen when he came home and he knew straight away something was wrong. During that week I had been distant and had barely answered his texts and screened his calls. I did answer every now and again and gave the kids a chance to speak to their dad. He asked me why I hadn't been responding to his texts and he tried to kiss me, but I turned away, and before I knew it the first things that came out of my mouth were, "I want a separation." I have to admit that he didn't look very surprised when I said it. He nodded his head and said, "What do you know?" Which was just a punch in the gut, because I wanted him to deny it or say something like it was a one-off thing. I asked him to tell me everything, like when did it start? And he said they started about 10 years ago. At first it was flirtatious messaging and a sneaky kiss in the office when they briefly worked together, and the affair was on and off. She apparently always felt guilty, and her way out of that was to marry the next man that was interested in her and proposed. He admitted that they had sex on her wedding day, and when he is out of town they meet. At this point I couldn't breathe and I was sobbing. I hated that the next words out of my mouth was, "Did you even ever love me?" He hesitated and said yes, of course, but he was never in love with me the way he was with her. I cleared my throat and had said to him that he should tell her husband. There is no point hiding it anymore. I told him that all his stuff was in the garage and he can find somewhere else to stay. I let him know that I have spoken to a family lawyer, and I told him that when I feel ready, and only when I feel ready, will we see each other again and talk about the future arrangement with the kids. I said any further communication can be done through my sister-in-law or my brother. I said, he is allowed to see the kids but only at their place. I am of course wanting full custody of the children because it hurts too much to give him anything at this point. He agreed to all my points because he knew he was in the wrong. He tried to say sorry and then I absolutely lost my shit and screamed, "No fucking no way are you sorry? For 10 fucking years you have both deceived everyone we know. Please take your shit and leave and tell that woman you have been fucking for 10 years that I do not ever want to see her fucking face again." Certainly not my shining moment but also a culmination of all the hurt and anger over the last few weeks that they have caused. I have no intention of talking to my ex-best friend or really to my soon-to-be ex-husband until I have had the time to grieve. It's been a crazy, painful year, but our divorce has been finalized. And I'm free. My ex-husband and my ex-best friend is no surprise are now in an actual relationship after the ex-best friend's husband found out about the affair. He divorced her, and since then we have met up for coffee to check in on each other and our mental health. He's been great sending encouraging messages and he lives overseas and from his Facebook updates has started dating again. So I'm very happy for him. The legal and custody battles had been fairly stressful but the ex-husband agreed to all my terms. The custody of the children was the only thing he really fought for. I have custody of the kids and he sees them on the weekends. The kids including myself have all been going to therapy separately. My ex-husband wants to see them more and during school break the kids have the choice to stay with him or me. They have been good about it and stay with him for a week or so and then back to their mummy. Apart from necessary conversation I steer away from my ex-husband and the ex-best friend. It still hurts so much and I understand that it will take some time to heal, but I am letting go, because I don't want them to have that level of influence over my life. I decided to sell the property we were living in and move closer to family and friends because as you know, it takes a village. And I have been extremely grateful for the support I have received over the last year. I'm tearing up just as I'm writing this, knowing that I couldn't go through all of this without my loved ones. And for myself, I am happy overall, still a work in progress but grateful for life. The kids and myself have been enjoying life and when we have the time and the money try and take little trips here and there so the traumatic events of the divorce doesn't linger and can be replaced by good memories. Memories where they spent road trips and adventures with their mom. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Red Relationships to never miss a future upload.